Before we get into today's game, I want to talk about the sponsors for my channel. Card Conduit is the best way to sell your unused Magic cards. Whether you've got a box of unsorted bulk, or a complete and alphabetized set, there's a great option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% better than using any one buy list, and that's after fees are applied, you can rest assured you'll get the best bang for your buck. And if you use the affiliate link in the description below, or the promo code MTGMUDSTA, you'll save 10% off their fees. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. And if you use the promo code MTGMUDSTA, your first purchase of MTG sealed and singles will be 5% off. And Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest deck. So be sure to use the code MUDSTA or the affiliate link down below to save 5% on your next order. Today's patron shoutout goes to Marcus. Thanks Marcus for supporting me through Patreon. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game finds Mika playing his Kadena deck, and he keeps Golgari Signet, Island, Mischievous Quainar, Verdant Catacombs, a Dimir Signet, a Swamp, and a Darkboar Pathway. Mark is playing the now desparked Narset, keeping 3 mountains, Elsha of the Infinite, Serum Visions, Jeskai Ascendancy, and a Thriving Isle. Max is playing his fixed Yuriko deck, keeping Temple of Deceit, Island, Lonely Sandbar, Sudden Substitution, Whisper Silk Cloak, Snap, and Lantern of Insight. Ian once more is playing his Radha deck, and unfortunately his opening hand has a Panglacial Worm. It also has a Hidden Nursery, 2 mountains, Cosmium Confluence, Steel Hellkite, and a Rampaging War Mammoth. Mika wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs, cracking it and passing. Mark's turn has him playing a Thriving Isle, naming white as it comes in tapped. Max also has a tap land with a Temple of Deceit, and he scries 1. Ian wants to play one as well, dropping a Hidden Nursery and passing. Mika's turn 2 has a Swamp coming in, and he pays 2 for a Golgari Signet. Mark draws, plays a Mountain, and taps 1 blue for a Serum Visions. He draws a card and scries 2 and passes. Max draws, plays a Lantern of Insight, and everyone reveals their top card. He then plays a tapped Lonely Sandbar. Ian's turn has him playing a Mountain for turn, and he then casts Radha. He ships it after that. Mika's got a Forest for turn, and now has enough mana for Kadena. He follows up with a free Morph creature from his hand, drawing as it enters, and passes. Mark's got an Island for turn, and pays a red, a white, and a blue for Jeskai Ascendancy. He passes once it resolves. Max draws, plays an Island, and then hard casts Yuriko from the command zone. Ian draws and plays a Mountain, and passes. Mika's turn has him drawing and playing an Island for turn. He then casts a Dimir Signet, and once that mana rocks out, casts another one with Felwar Stone. He then plays a Morph from hand for free, drawing as it enters. Going to combat, Mika swings Kadena at Mark for 3, who takes the hit. Mark's turn has him playing a Mountain, and casting his commander with Narset, and passing once she resolves. Max draws and makes a deal to poke Ian for 1 so he can hit a land drop. Max swings Yuriko at Ian, who takes the 1, and Max reveals and then puts to hand the Swamp on top. He plays the Swamp for turn, and passes to Ian. Ian's turn has him playing a Hidden Volcano which comes in tapped, and he casts a Skyshroud Claim. Mika responds by flipping up a Mischievous Quainar, and copies the Skyshroud Claim, and he and Ian both get to go and find 2 forest cards. Once they're done, Ian passes. Mika's turn has him playing a Swamp, and he plays for free another Morph creature. He draws from Kadena, and then goes to combat. He swings his commander at Ian, and the Quainar goes at Max. Both of them take the hit for 3, and Mika passes. Mark's turn has him drawing and playing a Fabled Passage in his main phase, which he then cracks to go and find a Plains. He then casts See the Truth, and follows it up with Chart a Course. Narset gets pumped from Prowess and the Jeskai Ascendancy triggers, but Mark decides not to loot from the Jeskai Ascendancy second part, and he then swings Narset at Ian for 9. He gets to cast See the Truth from the graveyard, drawing 3, and after that, Mark moves to his end step, discarding down to 7 and passing. Max's turn has him drawing and playing a Shipwreck Marsh. He then goes to combat and swings Yuriko at Mark for 1. Mark takes the hit, and Max gets to put a land from top of his library into his hand. In his post-combat main phase, Maximus then casts a Gilded Lotus. We also realize that Narset should have been untapped because of Jeskai Ascendancy after Mark casts the See the Truth, but Mark announces he wouldn't have blocked anyway, and we leave the damage as is. Ian draws, and plays a Pit of Offerings, exiling some spells from Mark's graveyard. He then casts a Panglacial Worm from hand, and passes. During his end step, Mika casts Brainstorm, and then flips his Mischievous Quanar face down. Mika's turn has him drawing, and playing a Slitherboar Pathway, and once more casts a free Morph creature. He draws another card as it enters, and then goes to combat. He swings Kadena at Maximus for 3, who takes the hit. After combat, Mika casts Birds of Paradise, and passes. Mark draws and plays a Reliquary Tower. He then casts Azorius Signet, triggering Prowess and the Ascendancy, and then follows up with Kakar. He then casts a Crimson Wisp, targeting Kakar and giving it haste, and making a Spirit token, and triggering Prowess again, plus the Ascendancy. Moving to combat, Mark swings Kakar at Mika, and Narset goes at Max. This has Mark casting Mika's Brainstorm from Narset, and he untaps his creatures thanks to the Ascendancy, plus triggers Prowess and the Pump again. Before damage though, Mika casts Putrefy on Kakar, and Max then casts Snap to bounce Narset back to hand. With both of his attackers neutralized, Mark just passes turn. Max draws and casts a Feywild Visitor. He goes to combat and swings Yuriko at Mika, who decides to block with a Morph creature. In his post-combat main phase, Maximus then casts an Archfiend of Dross. He then plays a Sunken Hollow and passes to Ian. Ian's turn has him playing a mountain, and he then casts a Cosmium Confluence and chooses to destroy the Jeskai Ascendancy and put 6+1/+1 counters onto a cave and animate it. He then goes to combat. He swings the Panglacial Worm at Mika, who responds by flipping up an Icefeather Aven, bouncing the worm back to hand. After that, Ian passes. Mika's turn has him playing a Castle Vantress, which he then activates to scry 2. He follows it up by playing a Morph card, which allows him to draw a card from Kadena. He then swings a Morph at Mark, and the Icefeather Aven goes at Ian, with both of them taking 2. Mika passes after that. Mark draws, and plays an Island for turn, and then recasts Narset. He then plays Shorakai, and passes turn. Maximus draws, and casts a Coveted Jewel, drawing 3 as it comes in. He then plays a Dwar Isle Refuge, gaining 1 life. Maximus then follows up with a Whispersilk Cloak, and equips it onto Yuriko, and goes to combat. He swings Yuriko at Mika for 1, and since Mika can't block, he takes the hit. This has Max revealing Shakedown Heavy off the top, and each opponent loses 3, plus he gets to make a Fairy Dragon from the Feywild Visitor. With nothing else, he passes to Ian. Ian draws, and main phase cycles a Rampaging War Mammoth. He destroys Shorakai with it, and draws a card, and then plays a Forest for turn. He follows that up by casting a Drum Hunter, and then moves to his end step, drawing from it and passing to Mika. Mika's turn has him casting Cultivate in his main phase, finding a basic for the field and a Swamp to hand, which he then plays. He then plays his free Morph for turn, and gets a draw trigger from Kadena, but Maximus responds by cracking a Lantern of Insight to make everyone shuffle. Mika draws off the Morph entering, and then casts Ashiok, Dream Render. He then downticks Ashiok to mill Mark for 4, and then exiles each opponent's graveyards, and then moves to combat. He swings a Morph and the 2 birds at Maximus, and Max blocks the Birds of Paradise with the Fairy Dragon, and the Morph creature with the Archfiend of Dross. Before damage, Mika flips up his attacking Morph to reveal a Serpentine Basilisk, and then flips over a Grim Haruspex. With an unblocked creature going at Maximus though, Mika gets the Coveted Jewel, untapping it and drawing 3, and the Birds of Paradise dies, and the Archfiend and Basilisk trade. Mika then loses 4 to the Archfiend, and draws 2 cards from the Haruspex triggers. In his second main phase, he then plays a Soul Ring, and passes. Mark's turn has him playing a Talisman of Conviction, which triggers Prowess. He then plays a Storm Splitter, and he casts Ponder, copying the Storm Splitter and triggering Prowess again. Going to combat, Mark swings everything at Mika, and recasts his Ponder off of Narset attacking. He decides to shuffle and draw, but pumps his team and gets to make more Storm Splitters as well. But before damage, Mika flips up 1,000 Winds in response. All of Mark's creatures get bounced, alongside any other tapped creatures on the board, and Mark just moves to his second main phase. He plays an Exotic Orchard for turn, and then casts a Chaos Warp and targets a Morph. Mika shuffles the card in, and then reveals off the top and puts to field a Void Mage Apprentice, which at least is face up. With nothing else, Mark passes. Maximus draws and plays an Island. He then moves the Whisper Silk Cloak to the dragon and swings it at Mika. Mika can't block, and Maximus gets the coveted jewel back and draws 3, and then ninjutsus in Yuriko. Mika then takes the 1, and Maximus reveals Talisman of Dominance off the top, dealing 2 to each opponent. Max also gets to make another Fairy Dragon token, and in his second main phase, he casts a Clackbridge Troll. He gives the goats to Mark, and then casts a Fortune Teller's Talent. With nothing else, Max passes. Ian draws and plays a Mountain. He then casts an Aurora Phoenix, and cascades into a territory color. He then goes to combat. He swings the Drum Hunter at Max for 2, and Max decides to be nice and just take the 2, and Ian gets to take the coveted jewel. This has him drawing 3, and in his second main phase, he casts a Screamer Killer and passes. Mika draws and casts a Morph face down, drawing again. He then casts another Morph for actual mana this time, drawing yet another card. Mika then follows up with a Necrotic Hex, but Max responds with a sudden substitution. Mika then flips up his Mischievous Quainar, copying the sudden substitution and taking control of Max's sudden substitution so that he can keep control of his Necrotic Hex. The Hex then resolves, everyone sacrifices their boards, and Mika gets 6 zombie tokens. He then plays an Oversold Cemetery and passes. Mark draws for turn, and immediately casts a Blasphemous Act to destroy Mika's zombies. Once it's resolved, he casts Narset and passes. Maximus draws and plays a Baleful Strix, drawing a card, and then casting Sizen. He follows up with the Talisman of Dominance that we saw, and then plays Minds Aglow, putting 3 mana into it. Ian adds 1, and Mark adds 2, with everyone drawing 6 cards. Maximus then passes turn. Ian draws for turn, and draws 2 from Sizen, losing 2, and then plays a Command Tower. He follows up with the Sunbird's Invocation, and then plays Panglacial Worm again. He gets his Invocation trigger, and keeps a Gruul Rage Beast. It comes in, and fights and trades with Sizen, and Ian then passes turn. Mika draws and plays a Thieving Amalgam. He then plays a Silent Spectre, and follows up with a Lightning Greaves, and equips it onto the Spectre, and then goes to combat. He swings the Spectre at Ian, and takes the coveted jewel, drawing 3 cards, and as the Spectre connects, Ian discards 2. Mika then moves to his second main phase, playing a Scroll of Fate, and attempts to move the Lightning Greaves onto the Thieving Amalgam. Mark responds with a Swords to Plowshares, and targets the Amalgam though. With that on the stack, Mika activates his Scroll of Fate, putting a creature into play face down. He then morphs it face up, revealing to be everyone's favorite, Willbender. Much to Ian's disappointment, the worm is then exiled, and he gains some life, and the Greaves are then equipped. Mika then downticks Ashiok again, milling Mark, and then exiling all opponents' graveyards. He passes after that. On Mark's upkeep, Mika manifests his top card, and Mark then draws for turn. Mark then plays Veyron, and he follows up by recasting the Storm Splitter. And once that's out, cast Preordain. Prowess triggers twice thanks to Veyron, and Mark also gets to make 2 Storm Splitters, and then buffs his team. He then plays a Gaia Reach Sanitarium, and follows up with Talisman of Creativity, triggering all of his prowesses again twice. He also plays a Boros Charm to give Narset double strike, and creates more Storm Splitters, and buffs his team even further. Going to combat, Mark swings Narset and the 4 Storm Splitters at Maximus, plus a now lethal amount of Storm Splitters at Mika, and the rest of the Storm Splitters go at Ian. Mark gets his on attack trigger from Narset, casting Necrotic Hex from Mika's graveyard, making a bunch of Storm Splitters, plus pumping his team even more. They then resolve the Necrotic Hex, and Mark is easily able to sacrifice 6 of the new Storm Splitters, while everyone else has to sacrifice basically their board. Mark then gets the coveted Jewel, drawing 3, and Max and Mika then die, with the coveted Jewel going away. With nothing else, Mark passes. Ian draws and plays a Maelstrom Colossus, cascading into a Captivating Crew. He also gets his Sunbird's Invocation trigger, and he hits a Sweet Gum Recluse, which cascades him into a piece of ramp. He then casts a Chef at Monitor. Several of Ian's creatures then enter with 3+1/+1 counters, and as he goes to find dice, pass his turn. Mark draws and plays an Island, and then casts Balmor. He casts Factor Fiction, triggering Prowess, and the Storm Splitters, and Mark decides to keep the 3-card pile. He then casts Gataxian Probe for 2 life, triggering Prowess again and pumping his board even more. He then swings out at Ian. Without enough blockers, and with a huge amount of pumps from Balmor and Narset, Ian takes lethal, and Mark wins the game. Game review time. This game, once more, I'm not in front of the camera because I'm still unfortunately dealing with a non-stop onslaught of daycare colds. I'm just not feeling up to it, so you're gonna have to bear with me. But today's game was about 1 hour and 59 minutes and 43 seconds. There were 2 points in this game where things got a little bit hectic, the first being the Necrotic Hex and the sudden substitution, which was then copied by a morph creature, which we weren't sure how it totally interacted, but we came to the conclusion that it was okay to do it. But other than that, there was some back and forth and there was some politicking. Ultimately, also, there were a couple long turns, like with Mark going off in that last turn, where we kept having to calculate how many Storm Splitters he was making, how many Prowess triggers he was getting, etc, etc. His Narset deck was super sweet. It felt like he was set back at least 2 or 3 times this game, and he was still able to come out swinging near the end of it. Ian's Radha Heir to Kel deck is a ramp deck, and honestly, it's really just funny at this point that every game he's played with it so far, he's drawn or had in his opening hand a Panglacial Worm. It's unfortunate because he really just wants to cheat it out from his library. Mika's Kadena deck, as always, is super sweet to see, and hopefully he's been able to update it with some of the new cards from Duskmourn. I think there's a lot of support for face-down creatures. Maximus's Yuriko deck, he calls it fair, but I'm still waiting to see what it'll do. Unfortunately, we just don't get a good showing with it. It seems like all he does is ramp and do a minimal amount of damage while playing with people's top decks. Hopefully in the future he'll be able to showcase exactly what it wants to do. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say